How's it going, Yankee fans? My name is Alex with my co-host here, Ryan Garcia, and we both wanted to give you guys two different players, ones that could make a significant impact down the stretch. We try to avoid the big names like Aaron Judge and Stanton and Garrett Cole. Try to find a few guys who maybe have been struggling or newer to the team, who have just been either performing well or maybe tapered off or had inconsistent seasons, or maybe even guys that haven't featured at the MLB level yet. So I think that'll be really interesting to discuss. But two guys on each of our perspectives. Who can really help down the stretch and put this team in a spot where they can make a hopefully a first seed type of situation in the postseason and push for some good winning games down the stretch. And I'm excited to discuss this topic, Ryan. How you doing today, my man?
I'm doing great. You look at this roster and they've just got a ton of guys who have contributed already or are kind of poised to have a good second half here. So there are definitely a lot of guys to pick from, whether you want to go big with, just the obvious guys like Judge and Stanton or a little more low key. I think kind of playing off that point you made about guys maybe not necessarily at the major league level, Oswald Peraza is a very interesting player for the second half because, he can make an impact in two different ways. One, he actually gets called up and plays, or two, he gets traded and becomes that impact player via trade. But Peraza has been great since June started. He's slashing 298, 372, 537. His WRC plus, a stat I've used a lot on this channel, is 140. That means he's 40% better than the average AAA hitter this season. And he's the second youngest player at AAA doing this since the start of June, of course, with 15 extra base hits in 31 games. He's got great speed. He doesn't make a lot of errors. And again, errors aren't the greatest defensive stat because there's also plays that you have to make that are tougher plays. Can you make those? He's got good range. He's a speedy guy. He's young. He's athletic. So you'd imagine he can at least get to tough plays. And I think the Yankees are just looking for someone at shortstop who can make the requisite plays, make the plays that are made at them. I think IKF struggled with that a lot, especially with making throws across the diamond. Peraza is a natural shortstop. He was signed as an international free because he was the great defensive shortstop. The hitting tools have come around. He's, again, one of the youngest players in AAA, having a phenomenal summer. He could definitely be a big impact guy. If you want to look at projections, I know that fantasy players love using projections, when they go into their drafts. And I think that they're pretty valuable for future production. Coming into the season, he had a 2.8 wins over replacement per 600 play appearances. That was his projection, right? And that's a pretty solid player. If you want to think 2.5 to 3 wins, that's a solid player. For context, IKF is on pace for a 1.4 WAR. So that's like double the player, right? You're getting double the production per plate appearance, which could be really valuable for the Yankees down the stretch, especially when a lot of these games are going to have more value to them, especially in October. So, Peraza can be a guy who they call up, and I think he's close to major league ready at the very worst. And he's got great speed, great defense. He kind of fits everything that you were looking for in IKF, but he does it better. So I just think he's a big guy to impact on this team.
Yeah, look, Oswald Peraza is a really intriguing player. As you mentioned, in June, he was phenomenal. Hit 303 with a 38% on base rate. Smashed 4 homers. Already in July, he's hitting 290 with a 36% on base rate, with 3 homers and 9 RBIs and 9 stolen bases, right? He has 20 stolen bases this year. So pretty athletic, like you mentioned before. Great defensive player. I just wonder if they kind of want to continue relying on IKF because it seems like they don't have there's no indication they're going to swap him out or supplement him. And I think that's kind of a big argument to have, is like, what does he have to do to justify the Yankees pulling up Peraza? And I heard, and I agree with this argument, and I said this a couple weeks ago, I think that general manager Brian Cashman is keeping Peraza down because the difference between AAA and Major League Baseball is so significant that if Peraza struggles at the Major League level, it will decrease his value. And right now, his value has never been higher. As you mentioned, he's extremely young, and he's doing extremely well and productive and efficient in all categories. So to flip him at the deadline, keeping him at that AAA level where he's just dominating is exactly what they want to do. But in the sense, in the idea of maybe at the deadline they do not trade Peraza, it makes a lot of sense that they would pull him up and give him an opportunity to maybe even just platoon the shortstop position, like play the hot hand. IKF and other guys have had pretty lengthy cold streaks at times. And yes, this batting average is decent. I like people always harp on the batting average. But the reality is he does not hit for power. He does not really fit the Yankees mold. He gets on base. He's a decent athlete. He's a decent base runner, but his defense has definitely lacked at times as well. So there are arguments to make that maybe Peraza is deserving of a chance after the deadline if they do not trade him. So that's an interesting one. My first guy, as I'm going to go with Matt Carpenter as our kind of spark plug down the stretch here. Matt Carpenter has been absolutely lethal this season. Of course, he's hitting 354 with a 47% on base rate. And it's not like his sample size is small either, right? Matt Carpenter has a pretty damn great sample size of 31 games, 97 plate appearances. That's a good number to work off of. And he is about a 25% strikeout rate, 13.4% walk rate. He's already hit 13 homers. So he already has well above the amount of homers, 2 homers more than Joey Gallo, who's had probably twice the amount of at-bats up to this point in the season. But Carpenter just continues to mash. And defensively, he's able to play a couple positions. He can play the hot corner. He's not that athletic anymore at 36 years old, but he can play left field at a very, very average, probably below average level. But his offense has just been so lethal that you have to find ways to get him involved because you can't have him in the DH spot every night with Giancarlo Stanton taking over that spot. So I think that they're going to try and kind of use him in a myriad of different ways. If they don't make a big splash at the deadline, I expect to see Matt Carpenter involved heavily at multiple positions, mitigating fatigue for other players, and just the Yankees getting him involved as much as possible because that short right porch has been extremely friendly to him in Yankee Stadium. But Ryan, what are your thoughts on Matt Carpenter and his work, I guess, down the stretch here?
Well, I think Matt Carpenter does a lot of things very well in terms of his plate discipline, the power. Everything is just clicking for him. Obviously, he's not going to be this good for the second half. I think that'd be an unrealistic expectation, but projections are pretty high on him. I'm going to cite another projection. Zips has him at a 127 WRC plus for the rest of the season. So from here on out, they think he's going to be 27% better than the league average hitter. And I know that sounds like a huge power drop off or a huge drop off for Carpenter, and it is because he's been 158% better than the league average hitter, which is just mind blowing. But 27% better than the league average hitter is a really good hitter. That's still one of the 50 or so best hitters in baseball. So if you're getting a top 50 hitter in that lineup, with the Judges and Stantons and LeMahieu's of the world and Glabers and Rizzo's, that's a great bat to have. I think, like you said, he hasn't even been bad defensively, right? Like I know that throw home that against the Reds, it wasn't the best decision, I guess, but poor decision making like that, it was a one-time thing. Everyone's got mental errors that they make, but for the most part in terms of making the plays, he's done that pretty well. So I'm confident Matt Carpenter can be, a corner outfielder, DH type of guy on this team. And it's hard for me to justify, like, there's a David Peralta on the market or, a Cole Calhoun or whatever. Those guys are better than Matt Carpenter right now. And they're not projected to be better than Matt Carpenter. So he's made the Yankees world a lot easier where you can really focus on the best players on this market and go big or go home there because you don't need to get those marginal pieces because you have a Matt Carpenter, you have an Aaron Hicks, but Matt Carpenter's been phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a player who came out of absolutely nowhere off the Texas Rangers, a AAA affiliate, and suddenly he's becoming an absolutely different version of himself. If you were to tell me that Matt Carpenter, who hit sub 200 the last 2 years for the St. Louis Cardinals, was going to be hitting 354 with 13 homers in 31 games, that's a homer. It's a homer in every third game. Essentially, he had 10 RBIs in his last 2 games. Like, this guy is absolutely on fire. We haven't seen a player on this type of stretch since Barry Bonds. There's some stat out there that was like, there's no player in this sample size, whatever, that's hit more homers or this amount of production than Barry Bonds in like 2004 or something like that. So it's insane what we're watching in terms of Matt Carpenter's production. But who's your next guy? I know you have a relief pitcher in mind who is definitely a pretty solid player. Some a little bit of an erratic accuracy, but he's got some velocity. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, my next pick is Alberto Abreu, and the reason I know relievers aren't necessarily the most impactful players on the surface. They pitch one inning in a game. They don't necessarily, quote unquote, add a ton of value, but late inning relievers have a high impact on your win probability, right? So if you look at pitchers and win probability added, typically the top guys on that list are relievers because they can affect the game the most. They pitch in the most important situations. They pitch in tight games. They give up one run and the entire game changes, right? And Alberto Abreu has been absolutely phenomenal for the Yankees in his short stint here. This is his second stint with the Yankees. Remember, he was here last year and a little bit in 2020. Wasn't as good those years, but this year, 0.84 ERA, a 1.80 FIP, a 2.36 expected FIP, right? So the ERA and then the ERA estimators are really strong on him. They think he's a low 2 ERA guy. The strikeout to walk percentage is really strong at 22.7%. And the ground ball rate, a 61.5% ground ball rate is ridiculous, right? Like that's unbelievable. He's keeping the ball on the ground at an insane rate. He hasn't gotten barreled yet. He doesn't give up hard contact. He does a lot of things that you want in a reliever, right? As a Yankee, he hasn't walked too many guys. He gets swings and misses, and missing bats is something he struggled with last year. He really couldn't get those swings and misses and get chases out of the zone. And that meant a lot of guys were getting easy takes and working a lot of walks against him. Now he's establishing he's establishing his fastball in the strike zone a lot more consistently. This is a bullpen that's, Jonathan Weisiger's still trying to figure it out. You have the Lucas Litkes, Miguel Castro's. Well, Miguel Castro's actually hurt now, but those are guys where, they're kind of on and off. Your top three guys are Peralta, King, and Holmes, but you can't go to them every single night. Abreu gives them a nice little break there. I think he's a guy I'm feeling confident with in the 7th or 8th inning, can give you more than an inning, throws so hard. I mean, as you mentioned, he just has ridiculous stuff. This is a guy who's just really, really, really good at a lot of things and is excelled at, keeping the ball in the ballpark, getting strikeouts, not getting walks, giving up ground balls. His stuff is great. Matt Blake is great with pitchers like this. And it's hard for me to imagine that the Yankees are going to be able to go far in October without a dominant bullpen because it's been their identity for a very long time. It's the identity of a lot of really good championship teams. Even if you go back to earlier great Yankee teams, think of the late 90s dynasty, that bullpen, that team had a great.
Yeah, I mean, look, Alberto Abreu is one of those guys who could come in and make a significant impact at any given moment. But I am worried about his location abilities. Obviously, his velocity is up there. His sinker, you're talking about 100 plus at times, which is very rare. But again, when you're throwing that hard, it is incredibly difficult to locate those pitches. So you're just hoping to get them in the strike zone. And if you can get them in the strike zone, or at least near the strike zone, batters are not going to have a good chance of hitting that ball. So with that type of stuff, like you mentioned, if Matt Blake can continue to improve upon that and help him refine it a little bit more, we're talking about a guy who was DFA'd by 2 teams. He was involved in the Jose Trevino trade, and now he's back with the Yankees and making a pretty significant impact and could be down the stretch, as you've mentioned. That's a pretty solid value to get from a guy like that. And I think that ultimately he will play a pretty big part, especially as this team faces adversity moving forward. The bullpen does have some issues in terms of Ron Marinaccio kind of dealing with a dead arm issue. He's kind of fighting his way back. You have Jonathan Loáisiga, who's been a little bit inconsistent. You have Zach Britton still on the way back. There's a couple guys that we need to return from injury, but he can definitely help us down the stretch there. The last guy that I have in mind is Aaron Hicks. Now, Aaron Hicks obviously started off the season in awful form. He looked terrible. But now if you look at his stats, not too bad. 236, 36% on base rate, 352 slugging, has 6 homers, so not that much power behind his bat. But the last 2 months have been a little bit better. He's hit 3 homers this year, or rather this month in July, with a 333 batting average, 29 RBIs, 9 stolen bases. He's already on pace to break his stolen base metric by a significant margin. His career high was 13 back in 2015. So that just gives you another idea of how well the Yankees are running the bases. And Aaron Boone kind of said that recently. We've been a lot more aggressive. It's given us a lot more opportunity to back guys in on contact hitting, kind of taking a page out of the Tampa Bay Rays book there. So, I kind of like how they've incorporated just great base running along with phenomenal slugging, and then having those contact hitters sprinkled in throughout the lineup has given them a lot of production that we didn't have last season, and it's helped them kind of overcome those droughts. When you're not hitting those homers, you got to find other ways to get runners in, and they've done a good job of doing that. Obviously, you have one of the best offenses in baseball for a good reason. But Hicks, has really started to kind of increase his production and efficiency lately, has done a pretty seamless job transitioning to left field, which I think has been very underrated. And if the Yankees don't end up getting a big outfielder at the deadline, Hicks is going to have to shoulder a lot more of the burden moving forward, right? He's going to have to be a better player, and he's going to have to maintain the success he's been enjoying the last couple of months here. But here, I'll ask you this. Do you trust Aaron Hicks right now? Like, after starting the year kind of slow, production was off. He's been a little bit better the last couple of weeks. Are you feeling confident that he can maintain this level of production moving forward?
For Aaron Hicks, I think he's someone that has, in the start of the season, he kind of lost his power, right? We were concerned that he wouldn't be able to barrel up baseballs and get extra base hits. He was really just a singles guy, and that was exposed, right? Pitchers were able to kind of get him to induce weak contact and get him into easy out situations. It made him really bad with runners in scoring position when teams are playing tighter defense. And they're making, better plays, especially with 2 outs, right? You can't put a ball in play and try to force an error because they're just going to throw to first, right? It's an easy out. It's quite predictable. But as you mentioned, right, he's gotten a lot better as of late. The transition to left field has been great. I have a lot of confidence in Aaron Hicks to be a good left fielder for this team. And compared to the guys in the market, I don't know if there are many guys better. I think Ian Happ is an upgrade, of course. Soto, I mean, that's not even, I have to mention Soto. Of course, he's an upgrade. But compared to the other guys, right? And when you're in hot pursuit of a guy like Luis Castillo, you want to kind of keep your farm intact, or you want to keep the ability to, be flexible to make more moves if need be. You don't necessarily want to splurge on every single position because you may not have the prospect capital to do so. And Hicks has provided the Yankees a safety option. He's given the Yankees comfort at the position. And I talked about this yesterday in my Aaron Hicks video, where he kind of embodies what the Yankees have shifted to, right? Better speed, better defense. And Hicks has been a better base runner than in years past, and he's playing great left field. And the on base is great. The slugging has gotten a little better as of late. So if he can give you a 400 slugging percentage with a 350 on base the rest of the way with his base running and his defense, he's going to be a really, really, really underrated left fielder. He'll probably put himself in the top 10 left fielder discussion in the league pretty easily. So, I'm really happy for him because he's a guy who's really struggling and he was going through it, man. He's gone through it with injuries. He's battled back from a lot. So it would be really rewarding to see him be an integral part to a World Series winning team, like we kind of imagined he would have been after that 2018 great season he had.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, Hicks is an integral part to this outfield, and if he's not performing well, we feel that pretty significantly, especially with his switch hitting bat is extremely valuable in Yankee Stadium, and really just every stadium. Having that availability is really nice for the batting order. So hopefully he can continue to produce here. But this really wraps up the two players we each had for the stretch here. The second half of the year, coming off a phenomenal first half. We're leading in the AL East by 13 games. We are leading in all of baseball by 3 games. Hopefully we can start to put together some more wins. Starting back up tomorrow, which is extremely fun. But I hope you guys enjoy the All-Star break and just a couple of days off before we get started, and hopefully make a nice push toward the postseason. And let's do the big thing. Let's win the World Series, guys. I'm excited to see how the team progresses. Next couple of weeks will be really intriguing with the trade deadline coming up on August 6th, or rather August 2nd. So we will have you guys all that information as necessary and as it comes out, to make sure you guys are informed, as always, my friends. So make sure to like and subscribe. We'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Yankees episode.